Welcome back, weary travelers. Do I have a question for you? Why do we tell scary stories? Folk and fairy tales are a way we teach each other warnings and lessons. Don't be mean to that traveling old man. Be wary of wolves in the woods. Don't take that deal that seems too good to be true. Are horror films the same thing, or is there more to it? And more specifically, does the monster we choose to chase our protagonist portray more about us as storytellers than we think? This is something that's been bouncing around in my head for a couple years, but I really started thinking about this one time I was arguing with a friend about why watching a horror film is still worth it if the film itself doesn't scare you. In that conversation, I went into how scary stories and horror films are just modern-day adaptations of Greek tragedies or folk or fairy tales. They are fantasized versions of things that we as a people struggle with on a regular basis. So I want to talk about some of these basic genres in horror and how they could be addressed to real-world problems we face. I wrote a few of these articles before on my blog. I will provide a link in the description below, but I wanted to further elaborate each of these articles' arguments on the basis of one or two films that I feel most embody this discussion. I feel I should start with saying that these are largely based on my own perceptions, and thusly I might not address many potential applications these stories could have. Basically, bear with me, I might miss some things. In this video, I want to address werewolf movies and how they can be used as a metaphor for abusive relationships. So first off, before I get into the grisly entrails of lycanthropy's victims, let's address the werewolf in the room. As far as I can recall, there seems to be three types of beast within narratives. One would be the mysterious stranger running amok in town. The other would be yourself or the main character infected and going through these lunar changes. And the last would be a loved one dealing with the disease. I don't really want to touch on the stranger because that's a pretty broad subject depending on who you have representing this stranger. And I don't really want to talk about it being yourself that's infected because that could bleed into another discussion I want to have about why we tell ghost stories, in the sense that getting lycanthropy could be likened to you dealing with a hereditary illness or other disease. So what I want to address is when it is a loved one who is affected with this lunar lunacy, and how this could translate into real-world problems of dealing with an abusive relationship. So let's break this down a bit and follow the flow of a typical werewolf story. Usually we start with our main character. We're going to call them the defense. They usually have a lover, younger sibling, best friend who they largely take care of, or more just feel responsible for, either because of obligations or just because they love them so much and only want their happiness. We're going to call this person the offense. Whatever the case, either it's hereditary or because some trauma, the offense begins to change. They become more aggressive, can't control their temper, and start changing more things about their lifestyle. In the chaos of all these changes and rising aggression, they can become more abusive to our defense character. Even if they don't want to be, they just can't control their anger. It usually starts small and unnoticed by those around the offense and defense. In the stories, there will be just some dead wildlife popping up around, but nobody thinks too much about it. The person infected with the lycanthropy knows something is wrong, but they either try to ignore it or hide it, which always makes the problem worse. In real life, this is very similar. The outside world doesn't always know there's a problem. The defense might show up to work one day with messed up hair, runny mascara, or a bruise, but it's casually explained away with no one the wiser. And the offense at this point still thinks they either don't have a problem at all, ignoring it, or they think they can fix it themselves. They're hiding it. Then things escalate, as they always do. In the movies, this can be as fast as the next night, or as the moon gets closer to the full moon, the beast inside becomes more aggressive, or it escalates next month during the next full moon cycle. Either way, someone is either hurt or killed. In real life, it takes much longer to get to a fatal point, which actually makes it more dangerous. When things hit fast, like a car crash, it's obvious there's a problem. But when it's a slow burn, it's much easier for those involved to rationalize the problem away, thinking the outbursts are so few and far between, or they only do it when they drink, or whatever the excuse is to not seek help. When it comes at you slower, you don't really think it's as bad as it really is. That is, until it reaches the tipping point and someone really gets hurt. And I don't think I need to explain what that is. Everyone knows what that point is. This is when the offense is no longer that person you love or care for. They are the beast jeopardizing your well-being. They have fully transformed into something you don't recognize anymore. In these stories, there are always a few different possible outcomes. Let's say option A, the beast wins. The offense has killed or pushed away everyone linking them to their humane side, and they have let their addiction or rage or whatever it is that's controlling their lives take over. This is not a good ending. And when I say good ending, I don't mean like cinematically a good ending. I mean, this isn't a happy ending. Usually ends with them killing the one who was trying to help them. The one person that means the most to them, their last shred of humanity, they have to discard in order to fully embrace the beast, much like they discard their human form. Option B, the offense dies. Whether it be because they were unwilling to try and change or incapable of changing. Either way, they were too much of a risk to those around them and either willingly gave up their lives or were killed by someone else. In real life, this could literally mean the offense pushed the defense so far that in order to protect themselves, they kill the offense or have them arrested and get locked up. This might solve the problem for the defense, but the problem the offense was struggling with never gets solved. This is not a happy ending either. No one has to die because of something they can't control. There's always a better option, even if that means committing them to an institution of some sort. Rehab, hospital, asylum, prison, whatever. People do come out of those places changed if they're willing to try. Or at least they can live their lives in the safety of knowing that someone is taking care of them and will sedate them if they ever start to become a rage monster again. And then finally, option C, the compromise. The offense and defense work together to cure or maintain the offense's illness, either through locking them up each month or coming up with some sort of pseudoscience cure or magic remedy to maintain symptoms. In my opinion, this is the happy ending. Both parties admit there is a problem and both are willing to figure out how to solve it together. In real life, this could still mean rehab or treatment for, bipolarism or whatever the disease illness is that they might have. Either way, the offense and defense are together, fighting it together, and thus both become stronger and better for it. In the past, these stories usually ended with a bittersweet option A, which I generally dislike because it gives people the idea in their head that there's something wrong with them that cannot be fixed, and they are a monster because they can't control this one aspect of their life. But these days you're seeing more and more stories pop up with option C, because I truly believe we as a collective are less interested in saying you're a bad person because of this illness, and more in favor of, oh, this illness makes you do bad things? Let's see if we can figure out what triggers it, then see if we can eliminate it altogether and throw you back into society as a productive, happy civilian. And I've been thinking long and hard about which movie to pair this argument with, like you would pair a fine wine with your steak. I thought about the usual suspects: Werewolf in London, Wolfman, Ginger Snaps, or even dog soldiers, a personal favorite of mine. I even toyed with the idea of trolling with something like Wolf Cop. But then I started to think about what my point really is at its core. This is more about the beast within, or dark passenger as Dexter so aptly puts it, than just being about lycanthropy. The beast within doesn't literally have to be within in order for it to represent my point. This is all a metaphor for the abusive relationship. So that brought me to the Babadook, naturally. But then that one's been broken down 100 times already, even by us. Check out our very first video on this channel for that. Then, just by happenstance, I stumbled upon this diamond in the rough on Netflix. 2016's The Monster, written and directed by Bryan Bertino, the guy behind 2008's The Strangers, and it stars Zoe Kazan as Kathy, or the mother, and Ella Ballantine as Lizzie, or the daughter. In a nutshell, this movie is about an alcoholic mother and her daughter trying to survive the night when their car breaks down in the woods and there's a mysterious creature stalking them. But more than that, the movie leaves you questioning if this creature is the monster, or is the monster the mother's alcoholism? The very first thing we see when this movie starts is a little girl, Lizzie, sitting on her bed staring out a window, waiting. We aren't sure what she's waiting for yet, but she glances over at the clock as it switches to 7 a.m. Then she drags some luggage into the living room, makes herself breakfast alone, goes back to waiting, and then cleaning. Then the silence is broken by an alarm clock, and we see a close-up of the little girl's face. She's angry. She's not relieved. She's angry. And she walks off. Nothing has been said yet in this movie, but just from what we have seen, the disheveled house, the daughter trying to maintain it on her own, eating breakfast alone, no parental presence as of yet, we already have a pretty clear understanding of Lizzie's life. When she does go into the mother's bedroom to wake her up, there's a line that tells us that she's been waiting for 2 hours for her mother to get up. And her mother doesn't act apologetic to her daughter. She meets her daughter's aggression in return with aggression. Lizzie mumbles under her breath,
"Should have had Dad pick me up."
Excuse me,
This line tells us more about Lizzie than you might think at first viewing. Instinct tells her to rely on her father, but her heart wants her mother to come through. I'll touch more on this later, but I want to progress with the story right now, and this isn't as relevant right now. But then Lizzie leaves the room to get ready, and the mother falls back to sleep and makes Lizzie wait even more. And when she does come into the scene, her apology still is a hostile one, not really apologetic at all. So little is said between these two characters, but the way the actresses perform in these long silences says everything you need to hear. The film isn't telling you this is an abusive relationship, they're showing you. They drive to Lizzie's dad's house, hours behind schedule, and they have to stop for gas. Again, though very little is expressed in conversation, just silence, we can see the mother has something on her mind. And she knocks the window, asking Lizzie to roll it down, asking her to let her defenses down for a second, and then she offers Lizzie her mother's watch.
Turn on the car, roll down the window.
I was gonna give you this when we got there.
It was Grandma's.
Yeah.
Why are you giving it to me?
Because you're not coming back.
This is where the first line that she should have relied on her father instead of placing faith in her mother starts to show a little more of Lizzie's inner turmoil. Up until this point, we have seen a fierce little girl, angry and hardened by her mother, but upon receiving the watch, knowing what it means to her mother, her armor slips a little. She offers to stay one more night with the mom, giving her mom yet another chance to redeem herself. Then we see a flashback. What we assume is something that Lizzie is thinking about on the car ride, and immediately her armor's back on. It's a time her mother left her at home to find her own ride to a play that Lizzie was in. This memory puts Lizzie right back at her old mindset, and she tells her mother that she wants to drive through the night and just stay with her dad. This is when they hit something and the car spins out of control. Even in this, we see a little bit more dynamic between the two. The mother does care for the daughter, freaking out when the daughter has blood on her and whimpering from fear, but the mother makes the daughter do everything. She relies on Lizzie to be the responsible one, to call 911, call her father, talk to the mechanic. Lizzie does everything for her mother. This relationship is so well established in the first 20 minutes that when the horror part of the movie started, I was actually a little sad. I would have sat and watched a drama about these two driving to drop the daughter off at her father's and see if they ended up with a stronger bond or if the trip completely severed their love for each other. Regardless, the first few hints we have of something nefarious come from the daughter. I really like this. Again, we are building more of this little girl's character. She's serious, contemplative. She sits in silence and thinks. At no point do we hear her talk about My Little Ponies or boy bands. So instead of asking, how long is this gonna take, she questions what could scare a wolf. Because she's a little girl that's never had the luxury of assuming everything is going to be alright. Lizzie is trying to assess potential threats at all times. And what could scare a wolf so bad it would jump in front of a car is a potential threat. As the movie progresses, we get more and more flashbacks of their mother-daughter relationship, good and bad. You get to see that the daughter does love her mother, but that love comes at a cost. She hates her mother when she's drunk or around her boyfriend, but there are good times. She loves her mother and wants her to be better. So I'm going to come back around to the line about her saying she should have asked her father to pick her up again. This is our first look at Lizzie coming to the realization that she can't wait anymore for her mother to get better. She has to put aside childish things, hopes and dreams, and grow up. And all these flashbacks we see are glimpses into Lizzie's life that helps the audience understand why she's so cold and distant, yet also still hopeful towards her mother. I also feel like these flashbacks are things the characters are currently thinking about in the moment, because there are a few times, like the scene after the gas station, where we'll watch a flashback and one of the characters will change their behavior or mannerisms afterwards. I think this is one way the director got away with less dialogue. We see more glimpses into the character's mind so they don't have to say everything they're thinking. This is something I really love. It's a huge complaint of mine in other films. I'm constantly, when I'm watching movies, saying, please stop telling me everything and just show me. And this movie does it really well, and I feel like I should give it props for that. Like, not a lot of movies do this that well. Anyway, at some point while they're talking, the mechanic that arrived earlier disappears, and the beast decides to throw them a bone, or in this case, he throws them a limb, as if the monster is toying with them or trying to draw them out of their car. After this is where we get a beautiful scene where the mother is consoling the daughter and being motherly. But more important than that is the scene that almost immediately follows. It's only a split second, so if you aren't paying attention, you will miss it. Now, I didn't do any cuts here because I wanted you to see exactly how fast this shift in mood was for the mother and daughter. We have a scene of the mother and daughter embracing each other. Then cut to a scene of the mechanic crawling back to the car. and cut back to the mother and daughter, no longer embracing each other but separated, looking in different directions in total silence. Then the daughter does speak up and tries to get the mom's attention, but the mother responds bitterly. This transformation from nurturing to scolding so fast is what I'm talking about. One minute the mother is loving and caring, and the next she's cold and bitter and distant. This is why I say, even though she isn't a werewolf, this story feels like it follows werewolf rules. The daughter has to deal with the abuse from her mother as much as she does from the monster. The mother has these abusive tendencies and struggles with alcoholism in the movie, and she wants to be better for the little girl but can't gain control of her temper or her addiction. And Lizzie wants nothing more than to cure her mother, but if she can't, she just wants to be rid of her. In this movie, the mother is both offense and defense characters, and the daughter has to survive both the monster and her mother. But this is where I'm going to stop comparing the movie because I really think this film is worth a watch, and I don't want to spoil it any more than I already have to anyone who might be interested. I really enjoyed this movie in comparison to Lycanthropy, and as an aid to linking Lycanthropy or the Dark Passenger type films to the struggles of living in an abusive relationship. I feel like the monster in this movie was a physical representation of the abuse endured by Lizzie, and spoiler alert, in overcoming the events of the night, she's also conquering her past. But back to my original question. Why do we tell werewolf stories? Well, 50 years ago, or if we're being honest, probably more like 15 years ago, I feel like it was a warning and blaming. Warn people of signs of the offense type person and say, just stay away from them. They're a monster and there's nothing you can do about them except kill them or lock them up. Which is horrible. Everyone deserves a chance at happiness, especially when the whatever thing that makes them a monster by your standards is something they can't control or are struggling to control. Just makes a society of people who think in the us versus them mentality, and that only leads to heartbreak and, unfortunately, death. But lately, I think we tell these stories as a way to say, hey, this person is sick, they're not a monster. You only become a monster if you let your illness consume you. Let me help you through this. You will find that you can accomplish so much more with someone by your side than you could if you went at it alone. But as I said before, this is all based off of the perceptions of a mad southern woman. Let me know if you think I missed anything, or better yet, what's your favorite werewolf movie? I said before mine is probably Dog Soldiers. It's a lower budget film that took its limitations and made them work for it, and if you haven't seen it and you like beast movies, I would highly recommend it.
I hope I give you the shits, you fucking wimp.
Also, another side note that's completely not relevant. I don't know about anybody else, but in this movie, The Monster, anytime I saw the creature, all I could hear in my head was the kids from Attack the Block.
What's on the roof?
One of them.
Say it.
One of them big gorilla wolf motherfuckers.